Well, Zero Hedge published an interesting article today. It's kind of an anecdote, but also was rooted in national trends about the onset of food shortages in our current age of viral pandemic and lockdowns and such. And this is something that I've been concerned about for the entire time that this has been going on, because if you take people out of the economy, you tell them to stay home, and you replace their income with free cash from the government that's printed up by the Fed, there's only so many things they can spend that money on now that most businesses, or a lot of businesses, are shut down. And so by having all this money, it increases the demand for everything that's not bolted down, for everything that people can buy. And because of this, there's a lot of canned food and things like that, and meat that is selling out in stores across America, and the suppliers are trying to keep up with it. They're trying to keep the shelves stocked, but it would seem that the demand in this case simply outpaces supply. And the inevitable thing that happens when you have shortages of this kind is that prices have to rise. And that's what I've been worried about, since this started, was inflation. I just talked about a couple days ago about how, well, we don't know when this will start happening. Well, this is a sign that it's starting. I don't know necessarily how bad this will get. Perhaps the various producers will find a way to produce more. But if they cannot, if the demand is just still so incredibly high because people don't want for money. Money is not scarce right now for a lot of folks, thanks to this, $800 a week that they're getting. And of course, the PPP loans, the Paycheck Protection Program, that's keeping people's wallets pretty happy. And of course, they're not going out to restaurants and eating as much, so they are buying a lot more food in the grocery stores. And this was, we had an initial surge of shortages at the grocery stores, feels like forever ago, but we did. And that was just because of panic buying. What we're looking at now, is not really panic buying, because it's sustained, and it's not as extreme. It's just sort of a general rise in demand. And you could say, well, that's just because the restaurants are closed. So, of course, people have to buy more on average from the store. And so Coke would have to shift away from producing syrup to distribute to restaurants, which is then, produced and turned into soda, at a soda fountain, and shift more towards just producing cans and cans of Coke and other products. Nevertheless, this is going to have an impact on, the price of aluminum. And if aluminum gets more expensive, then everything that comes, packaged in aluminum, or aluminum foil, aluminum cans, canned food, canned drinks, the price of all of that must rise. And then, of course, something that's completely detached from the whole problem of supplying enough cans is, meat packing and meats. Meat prices are rising across the country. Why? Well, because everybody now can go out and just, without producing anything, they can just go out and buy whatever meat they want at the store. Production and consumption are being completely dislocated and disassociated from one another. Consumption now is a variable that seems to be independent of production. And when, consumption exceeds production, what you end up with is inflation. It manifests at first as shortages, but once the suppliers realize that they cannot supply, or that they cannot, satisfy the demand for their products at the current price, well, they raise their prices until supply equals demand. And that's why we're already seeing rises in the price of meat. Certain prices, of course, are going to be less flexible than others. It's going to take more time for certain prices to rise, versus others. Gasoline, of course, is an incredibly fluid price. Once this happens, all of these PPP loans and the higher unemployment checks that are coming out, that will, then it'll lose its impact. It will not be able to satiate people's needs. it will not be able to truly replace their income, because it's not a real income. It's a fake income. A real income, is when you produce something of value for other people, and then they, give you in exchange something else of value. And so when there's no real work or value tied to your income, it loses its potency. This is how you debase your money. And that is when the unrest in America will truly get bad. I think that all of this Black Lives Matter stuff is just sort of an opening salvo, because it was a completely unrelated issue. I think it was triggered by all of this pain from the virus and from our economic demise. But it was not a direct, these were not directly related to that. The people were not really talking too much about economics in these Black Lives Matter marches. Of course, you did have your dedicated Marxists and such, but that's not where the energy was. The energy was all, racial grievances and things. But once people start, once prices really start rising and people realize that these checks that they're getting for free aren't buying as much as they used to, aren't buying as much as they were used to before the pandemic, then you will have people rising up in the streets for much more direct reasons than just, a white person once walked across the street when they passed me, on Fifth Avenue, or ooh, that person of a different race looked at me funny. We're going to deal with, much more serious grievances. Grievances like, how do I feed my family with these worthless pieces of paper you're giving me? That's when people will get really angry. The angriest people in the world are hungry people. Those are the most desperate, the ones who will go to any end, to eat. And, I don't think that we're, on the brink of a famine in America or anything like that. I don't think it'll come to the point to where people can't afford food, but it'll be to the point to where food is consuming consuming is kind of an inappropriate word, where food is accounting for a larger percentage of their budget. We see this, with people in poverty all the time. The more impoverished you are, the bigger percentage of your annual income is spent on food. And the richer you are, the less it is, because food is just sort of a fixed cost that everyone has to pay for. But once you've met that need, you're good, and everything on top of that is discretionary spending, other than shelter and other basic necessities. But as the price of food rises, because this, money and food and the price of everything else rises, because of course it's not just going to be food; it's going to be all consumer goods. The prices will rise as there is more and more money and less production. Then people will feel poorer. They will feel like they're being made worse off, because they were told that everything's fine. You just stay home, do as you're told, don't produce anything, we'll just replace your income. People think that money is value in and of itself. And so, as we see more and more of these shortages, and I'm going to watch, maybe this is a fluke. That's a possibility, that this is just a fluke and it's only affecting meat and aluminum cans and whatever else for now, and that it'll go away very quickly, and we'll just have unlimited everything forever, no matter how much money we spend. But if this does continue, and I will be watching for it, we're going to have to start preparing for, another uptick in civil unrest. So with that said, if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.